And we are looking essentially for a young horse that when he is fully mature, he will be balanced, go forward, level and straight. Is a really, really important. Now, the difference between our sports horses and the thoroughbred racehorse is that we're looking for horses that are free from problems, so that by the time they're at the optimum age for their discipline, which quite frankly is quite often between 12 and 16, they still have got good enough conformation and are free from lameness and other problems that needs to be managed. Whereas the thoroughbred 2- and 3-year-old and the national hunt horses, to a lesser extent, they are managed so that they can be sold at the foal, yearling and 2-year-old sales. It doesn't matter quite so much, particularly in the flat race horse, if that horse has got a problem which perhaps he will be lame from by the time he's 8, whereas our horses, it's extremely important. Generally speaking, if a horse has a problem of an angular or rotational limb deformity, as a foal, yearling, 2- or 3-year-old, by the time he's 8, he'll be subclinically lame, and by the time he's 10, he will be overtly lame, and by the time he gets onto the podium or anywhere else, he will need to be managed. And that is what a lot of the problems in the older horses are. The first thing we're looking for is the horse balanced. And there's a very old-fashioned term, but it's just as applicable today. Does the horse fill the eye? And so for me, looking at this horse from the side-on view, I would say that this horse, to me, looks as though she is, you just stand her up, Carson, she is balanced. And the next thing I look for is, has she got the musculoskeletal structure to take her forward, so that she's going forward, and absolutely importantly, is she going to be level? So any asymmetry from left to right will, as the horse becomes older, I'm afraid to say, make it more difficult to ride, and at the end of the day, you will become unlevel and then lame. You must be aware that every horse does not look the same from the left and the right-hand side. So particularly in a 3-year-old, we're looking for a horse that perhaps has got slightly more top line on one side than the other. And I would say this horse is possibly fractionally more developed on the left-hand side than the right, but only fractionally. When you are looking at the horse for your evaluations, you stand here and Carsten will stand directly in front of him. That's it. So I can't see Carsten and Carsten can't see me. And that means the horse is then straight. If you're standing slightly to one side, you can't make the horse completely straight. And this, when she is standing up, does look pretty symmetrical. And if you could turn her around, Carsten, so she's facing everyone, then of course the handler has to stand to the side. So what I'm looking for here, and it's exactly the same if it's a foal yearling, 2- or 3-year-old, is essentially you have to look at them on the hard. You cannot assess this on the soft. You're looking for the feet being symmetrical, the coronary bands being as much as possible in parallel with the floor, but the inside walls of the hoof should be the same in the left and right. The outside walls of the feet should be the same in the left and the right. The legs should be good, as these are. They're lovely straight legs, and the shoulders should be symmetrical, which is difficult for you to see here because of the shadows, but the muscle over the shoulder blades should be the same on the left and the right, and the briskets here, they should also be the same. You should have a nice arc between the 2 front legs. There shouldn't be asymmetry between those. And I'd say this is perhaps the single most important thing. The hind feet, the heels, must be the same depth. So the hairline to the floor should be the same in the left and right heels of the back feet. And don't forget, the hindquarters are the powerhouse of the horse. The hind legs are joined onto the pelvis at the hip and the sacroiliac joint. So any asymmetry of the hind feet will be magnified as it goes up the horse's limb and cause a torque, an imbalance of the pelvis and a torque along the horse's back. The front legs, as you know, are not joined to the spine by any collarbone as we have, and they're just slung by muscle. So again, it's important the heels must be the same depth. A horse that has got a lower heel will drop on the left on that side, making him look lame in the opposite front leg. Very frequently, if we have a problem behind, the horse will look lame in the opposite front leg. And then we just see them walk away and back. And preparation and production is absolutely essential. You can see here how well this horse is walking in a straight line. We know Carston's the best in the business, but nevertheless, he's doing the good job. And you can see the horse was looking at the dirt on the floor just there, so he turned his head to the right, and as a result of which it looked as though he was slightly turning in his left front leg. Now, the first thing to notice here is that this horse looks as though he can go forward. She is wanting to go forward. She's not quite so much wanting to come this way because she's looking at you. Thank you. The other thing is that you can hear if the horse is level or not. You need to use all your senses, so your eyes and your ears, and this horse sounds completely sound. So the next thing that I do in the Futurity from the 2-year, sometimes the yearlings, but certainly the 2- and 3-year-olds, I ask them to go backwards. Now here, I'm looking to see that the horse lifts up all 4 feet like this, and watch the stifle that the patella doesn't jump, click. In other words, sometimes in the horses that we see at the Futurity, they may have straighter legs. This one hasn't, but they may have straighter limbs than the conventional British thoroughbred or Irish draft horse, and they can tend to have upward fixating patellas or slipping kneecaps. And this is the time that you can spot it. Can you just go backwards, Carsten? That's perfect. You see how well the horse can walk forward? That's it. And when he walks forward, you must essential to make sure he doesn't drag his front feet, indicating that he might have a wobbler syndrome or something like that. And the next thing we do is to turn them in a tight circle in their own length. And we're watching to see they can cross their feet over, the hind feet over, and note how flexible the neck and the back is. That's good, thank you. And now the other way. Oh boy. Well done. And you can see he's slightly less flexible this way than the other. But that is within what's called normal limits. And bringing these horses on so that they're level and do really well under saddle, particularly in the dressage phase, but also for jumping, it's really important these horses are what we call bilaterally symmetrical, which means that they flex equally to both sides. But one tip is to lead the foal in, if you lead him or go with your hand over the side like that, equally from the left and right hand side all the time, so that the horse is balanced on both sides, because after all 99.9% of the time we lead the horses from the left, and of course we're getting them to bend round us on the left. So that's essentially what I do for the Futurity. We also trot them up on the hard in a 20-metre circle, and just to make sure that they're completely level on the circle, which we can't do here. So that's it in a nutshell, Lynn. Are there any questions, please?
I was just one question about shoes in a 3-year-old.
Yes.
I mean, obviously some people have put shoes on because they're working them and other things. Is there any advantage or disadvantage, or it's down to your farrier?
you need the optimum action for the horse. So if the horse has got slightly flat feet, slightly weak feet, needs a little bit of manipulation of the hoof capsule, then it's a good idea to put shoes on. But generally speaking, a horse will have a more exuberant action without shoes.
So you wouldn't say it's a disadvantage of 3
No.
year olds not having them?
No. I think Lynn's got a view on this, haven't you, Lynn, about extending the length of the hoof?
Not particularly. Once we've started a horse on the lunge and it comes to the point that it carries the rider, we would normally put front shoes on. That would apply to 2-year-olds too for stallion preparation.
Yeah.
And then we would not put hind shoes on unless they had particularly shallow feet, and at the stud we have to walk across gravel, so you know we want to save that. But maybe with some horses that are perhaps a little less naturally engaged behind, we do find that the weight of the shoe on the hind foot just makes them make a little bit more effort.
You put on everything as a 3-year-old when you start them in work?
Sorry?
You would put shoes on every 3-year-old that you started with
At a
work?
point. You know, some not for 8 or 10 weeks, some you would say about 6 weeks, Kirsten. Yeah.
And then, yes,
Yeah.
it depends on the terrain. If it's like this, then you need shoes. If you're on grass all the time, you maybe don't. But one of the main reasons of putting shoes on behind is the horse is a little straight or he's a little weak in his hocks, for instance. You give them extra support by giving them extra length. So that's another reason for putting hind shoes on. Are there any other questions? I hope there are. Oh dear.
How important do you think the trimming of the feet is with foals?
Absolutely essential. Right, this is recent research work that's only come out this year. If foals very often, if they're outside high or inside high, but usually they're outside high, that means that the outside of the hoof wall is longer than the inside. They are very likely to have a hairline fracture of the inside wing of the pedal bone. And that is because their feet are not trimmed to the conformation and the level. As a result, most of these foals you never even see lame. You might just see them a little bit short for 48 hours. However, they develop club feet. So this is why it is absolutely essential that foals must have their feet balanced right from day one, because they can get a little hairline fracture when they're, say, 3 weeks old. Nobody notices anything about it until they're probably 10 months old. But the damage has been done. Now, if the foal had had its feet trimmed as a 3-year-old and it had gone galloping about in the field on the hard, it's much less likely to have got the hairline fracture of the inside of the wing of the pedal bone. Conversely, if the foal is inside high, they get a fracture on the outside wing of the pedal bone. And this is documented, it's peer-reviewed, it's new work, and it's really, really important.
Is the result the same between the lateral and the medial fracture with this?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. Yeah, the work has only been done on the front feet, but I see no reason why it couldn't be applicable to the hind feet as well.
Can I ask who that study was by?
You can, when I've got my iPad in front of me, yes. Or if you email me, I can send you the reference. So if anybody wants that reference and sends me an email, then I will send it to you. Okay, that's fine. I have to say it is quite complicated. I did have to read it several times first. It did come from somebody at the Animal Health Trust that's sort of up here, you know. And I've rewritten it. Lynn and I rewrote it, didn't we? I sent it to you in hand. Yes.
Yes.
So if you would like, rather than sending you happily sending you the reference, but the explanation of what the reference really means might be a help.
Would you say a 6-weekly trim would you go 6, or is it depending on the pony?
It depends on the pony. I certainly wouldn't go more than 6 weeks.
No more
Definitely
than 6
not.
weeks, just keep on top of it all the
You
time.
need to assess them every week.
Yeah.
So
Make sure
you
I
need to look at them and say, this foal is fine. Okay, do it in 2 seconds. This foal's fine.
Yeah.
Look at it next week. This foal's fine.
Yeah.
And we quite often look at these foals 2 or 3 week intervals, maybe once or twice, and then they go on to 5 weeks.
Yeah, yeah, but no longer than 6 weeks.
I think 6 weeks is too long.
Yeah, okay.
Even with the older horses, we
Yeah.
found,
Six.
because we bring a lot
Yeah.
through, nothing goes beyond 5 unless there's a drama. And at 4, I think, certainly for the young horses, they're a little more established later.
Yes,
Somebody
yes,
has to
yes.
do something
Yeah.
to change something, or something has to happen to the horse. Because there's a lot of resonance between an injury in the horse and what happens to the feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just something that happens to the horse that you think is not consequential can change how it moves and therefore changes
Absolutely.
how the feet are.
Absolutely. One thing I would say is when I'm vetting horses, I always like them to have had their feet trimmed, if not shod, within 24 days. Because if you vet a horse and it's been shod within 48 hours, often it may be a little bit sore. But once they go more than 24 days, the feet very frequently become imbalanced. And you go along, you trot it in a circle, and because it's got long feet, hasn't been shod for 7 weeks, it's lame. So that's to everybody's disadvantage.
Yeah.
And that's really just an extension of the feet balance as a youngster.